Welcome to Following. Join us each week as we explore practical ways to follow Jesus in everyday life. Christianity is not an event you attend, it's a life you live. Come along with us as we explore specific and concrete examples of how to do everything that Jesus commanded. This podcast is a weekly discussion of the intersection of the ever-changing situations of life with the unchanging Word of God. Come, follow Jesus with us.
And so when he had washed their feet, and taken his garments, and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, neither is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I do not speak of all of you. I know the ones I have chosen. But it is that the scripture may be fulfilled. He who eats my bread has lifted up his heel against me. From now on I am telling you before it comes to pass, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me." John chapter 13, 12 through 20.
All right, welcome back to Following. Phil, it's good to be here with you this morning.
Yes, it's ready to get back to the work.
Yeah, you took a week off for vacation. How was that?
It was good. It was
Good.
different than I planned, but not bad. So I was thankful for the way the Lord used unexpected distractions to help me grow in ways that I needed to grow. So it was a refreshing week. Thanks be to God. So.
Yeah, that's good. Well, this morning we're discussing the text that you just read on service and serving others, and this is actually from Pastor Andy Brown's sermon. He's not here today. Usually, whenever he preaches, we bring him along and he helps us navigate through these texts. But
he did a good job, and I think the emphasis was clear and concise, and very well stated. You know, there are 4 principles of Christian service that prove that our faith is genuine. You know, I think as he kind of began to unpack that, it really made a lot of sense that genuine faith serves as an act of love. Genuine faith serves as Jesus served. Genuine faith serves sacrificially, and genuine faith serves even those who don't deserve it. And I think as you see that unfolding of service in those capacities, you really see the importance of humbling ourselves and considering others more important than ourselves and serving them. If we want to humble ourselves, serving is the way you do it. Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to talk about today is kind of answering the question, which I agree, Andy did a fine job answering that. And so we're going to kind of come in with a magnifying glass and see what else we can learn about this topic of service. And so I guess the question as we begin this conversation is where do we begin with service?
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. Whenever we hear a sermon or a podcast or we read a book, sometimes you get this surge of, yes, I want to obey the Lord. Yes, I want to do what this text is saying. But then we don't know where to start. And sometimes we don't know where to start because the possibilities are literally endless. You know, we're called to serve one another. Okay, there's a lot of one another's. What do I do? How do I know what to put myself into? And I think at times it's easy to get overwhelmed by that, and because we don't even know where to start, we end up just stalling and sputtering out and not doing anything. I think the best course would be to start with your immediate circle of family, like your wife, your husband, your children, those who live in your home. And, you know, make a commitment this week, each day, I'm going to serve this person in my family in a particular way. I'm going to find some way to practically minister to them, to do something for their well-being. not even to be noticed, and if you can do it in secret, all the better. But if even if you can't do that, but to just actively choose to not wait to be asked to do something, but to look for what needs to be done, to look for what their actual needs are and seek to alleviate that need. It might be physical, it might be emotional, it might be spiritual, it might be having a conversation, it might be taking care of the kids so they can go out with friends. There's lots of different things, and it can be very simple and it can be very complex. But identifying a need in your immediate circle and then actively working to meet that need, even if it costs you time, money, whatever, that is what we're talking about here. And as you begin, you serve your family for a couple of weeks, you get into a habit of serving, and then you can expand that circle to the next level. Maybe it's your coworkers. How can I serve someone that I work with in addition to serving my family? So what you're doing is cultivating a habit of service, a habit of looking at others and treating them as you would want to be treated, noticing the needs of everyone around you, because there's needs everywhere, but we are oftentimes so focused on ourselves and our needs that we don't see anybody else's needs. So what you have to do is retrain your heart to pay attention to the people around you. So by starting small and then actively serving day after day, then slowly expand that circle a little bit. And then once that circle is fairly habitual, expand that circle again. Don't start with the people on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Start with the people in your house and slowly expand that service of circle.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because one of the temptations, at least and maybe in our circle, like let's talk about evangelism for just a second. One of the temptations in our circle, Southern Baptist, is we really, really push for world missions, and that's a good thing. But the problem is there's so much to be done, and there's so many people that need to hear the good news. And the temptation then is to focus solely on that, and then we miss that inner circle that you've just talked about. That discipling our kids, raising our kids, and training them up in the way of Christ. We miss the people on the street because we're thinking, well, I've got a mission trip coming up, or I give money to this missionary organization, and so we're so focused on people outside of our immediate circle that we just miss them, and we so in the same way serving others. Look at it's there's a popular trend going on right now on social media, and like the Reformed groups that I'm, or Christian groups that I'm in. I've talked to you before about certain Twitter circles that are on my feed, but they're discussing order of loves. I don't know if you're familiar with, like you have a primary obligation to your wife to love her first, or to your husband to love him first, and then your next obligation is to your children. You love them first, and then from there, it's the kids across the street, and so on and so forth. And I think that's kind of what you're discussing here, is we have primary obligations to serve our family, and do that faithfully. Also, one thing that you said, listing ways we do that, you mentioned spiritually. I think one of the best and probably, I don't want to say easiest ways, but the most obvious way to me to serve your family spiritually is to pray for them.
Yes.
Alone, by yourself, praying for your family.
Yes.
And that's one of those things that will not be noticed.
Yep.
And that's going to sort of give you an idea if you're serving to be noticed, or if you're serving because you genuinely want to serve.
Yep.
Because nobody knows if you're praying for them.
Yep.
And so anyway, I guess the next question is why is it you think that we sort of struggle to serve? Like, why is it so easy for us to avoid serving, or to think that, well, somebody else will take care of that, that somebody else can do that? Why is it such a great temptation to avoid serving?
I think we've trained our hearts to be selfish. I think everything we do, well, maybe that's a little expensive. A lot of what we do is self-indulgent. Like, I have a desire, I meet the desire. I have a want, I buy the want. I have a hankering or a craving for this food, so that's what we're going to eat for supper tonight. So we habitually train our hearts to gratify ourselves, and that's not necessarily bad, right? I mean, it's not bad to eat what you want to eat for supper, right? I'm just saying.
I don't know. Last night I had a craving for Taco Bell. I indulged.
Didn't go well for you.
No, it wasn't a good idea. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. So, but what I mean is, when we habitually, from our entertainment choices to our church choices to our books that we're reading to the shows that we're watching to the food that we're eating to the games that we play as a family, whatever, we have a very strong tendency to focus on what I want and to get what I want and to gratify myself. Serving goes against that grain because I'm requiring myself. It's kind of like you're driving down the road and you shift into reverse. Like it just jolts everything very uncomfortably. And so you have to retrain your heart to notice people instead of yourself. Instead of being fixated on what I want all the time, I'm fixated on what do those people need? What's going on in their life? So you have to pay attention to them. And we have a tendency to just be so self-absorbed from, I'm feeling bad, I'm having a bad day, I need my coffee, I need 5 minutes of, don't talk to me until I've, had my caffeine for the day, or, all those kinds of things are very self-focused. And we've just made a habit of providing for me, doing for me, making myself happy before I'm willing to let other people in, which is when people break into that intersection and demand help, we get annoyed.
Yeah.
To me, I notice it with my children. There's times I'm tired after a day of work, and I come home and it's like, I need this and I need this and I need this, and Dad, can you do this? And Dad, can you listen to me? Dad, can you watch this? And I'm just like, stop talking, And I think it's because I've been focused on me throughout the day, and now they're needing help, and I am. It's that shifting of the gear, and it's very hard. So if we can make a habit out of looking for ways to care for them in the small things, you start small, start slow, and you begin to shift slowly. You don't have that jolting pain that you typically do. So I would say that's the number one reason. I think another reason is we're lazy. We procrastinate what requires effort or what is hard. And serving others when there's no benefit back to me for it, tangibly. Like I'm not getting anything out of it other than the joy of serving them. It's a hard sell for self-indulgent people. And so I don't want to expend that energy. Our natural tendency is to cruise or coast to a stop. And we have to keep the pedal pushed down to keep moving. And I think that serving others requires that constant focus, that constant effort of noticing, paying attention, and acting to alleviate whatever the need is. It just requires a lot more effort. So you can't do it coasting. It requires you active concentration. And I think that's why those are the two main reasons I would say we don't serve very often, is because we're habitually self-focused and we avoid what requires constant effort. And so if we can recognize that we have to retrain ourselves to be focused on those around us and to keep a constant pressure of looking forward, at some point, I think some of that becomes second nature. I do believe that. And I think that, like when you're learning how to drive a stick shift, it requires a lot of concentration because everything, you got to use both feet, you got to use both hands, and at some point, it's not as hard. You don't stall the car out and you don't jump it around all the time because you don't know how to work the clutch right. Eventually it becomes second nature, and you're moving through that stuff. You don't even think about it. You can have a conversation. You can clip on the radio. You can do all those things just like you would drive an automatic car. But it takes practice. It takes effort. And I think that the reason people don't like standard transmissions is because it requires so much concentration all the time. And I think the same thing applies to service.
Yeah. You just bought an automatic or
I did. I did. Yeah.
Okay. Be honest. How many times have you stalled it?
Couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. My son I think it was Josiah. No, it was Nate. I picked him up from a game one night, and he's like, "Oh, Dad, why are we driving this? This is going to be terrible." And I'm like, What? I thought you'd be excited, And he's like, "No, you don't know how to drive." I said, "I know how to drive a stick." He said, "Yeah, but you're rusty, Dad. You haven't done it in a long time." I was like, "Son, I know how to drive the car. Get in." So, I think it's that it's just that constant focus. Eventually it becomes second nature.
Yeah. Something in there that you said, you were talking about serving others for something in return.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that story, or I don't know if this is necessarily a story, the parable, whatever Jesus told, that about the host inviting the wealthy people that okay, you came to my table, now you owe me something.
Yeah.
And he tells his disciples, when you do this, don't invite the wealthy people,
Yeah.
the people of noble stature in society. Invite the poor, and invite those who can't give you anything in return, because your return is rewards in heaven.
Yeah,
that's not material things here, and so we need to have that mindset whenever we're serving people, that we're not doing this for glory. We're not doing this for an IOU or recognition or anything like that. I mean, this is, we started this community care thing. How long ago was that now? 2 years?
A couple years
ago. And that's our whole, we're going out and serving our community, not because we want to be known as the church who serves, or Make an FBC there. If you want to serve, go to make. We're not seeking for recognition. We're going and helping people, because they need it.
Yeah,
and because we've been blessed and we have the ability to go and serve others, and so that's kind of the I think the mindset that we want to get out here, is serving not for anything in return, but simply because this is what we do. Why? Because Jesus served us.
Yeah.
Because he served us in the ultimate way, and he continues to give us gifts and blessings. So the next question here is how do we know? I guess how do we know when to serve? Like there's all sorts of different opportunities. Okay, you've talked about the circles. You've talked about your family. That's a given. Serve your family. There is no, oh, my wife needs help. Well, the Spirit's not really leading me to serve my wife. Okay, that's nonsense. Serve your wife, serve your children. All those things. Those are given. But what about when it comes to like church ministry? And I know we want to kind of broaden our reach a little bit to. This isn't necessarily a program that we're pushing, that you have to sign up to serve. You don't have to sign up to serve. Just serve people that need service.
Well, I would say you have to trust the Spirit, and I think what I mean by that is you should begin your day with the Lord, and as a part of that time with God, you should tell God, like, I want to be used by you today. I want to be an instrument in your hands. I want your compassion and your love to flow through me into those around me, and you see all things perfectly. And so would you please draw my attention to the needs that you want me to minister to. Help me to see them, and when I see them, to know. And I think if you pray that way and then begin to look, and when you see something, and trust the Lord is leading in that direction, and we serve a God who providentially controls all things, and so He's placed you there. So serve, and if He prevents that, then trust Him in that regard. Sometimes too, like Paul, he tried to go to, what was it, to Achaia, or I don't know, he was trying to go to somewhere, and the Spirit prevented him multiple times, and then he had a dream about going to Macedonia. The Lord will do that at times if we're not getting the signal right. He's gonna redirect our hearts, and so I think the key is pray and have a willing spirit, pay attention, and be sensitive to the Spirit's leading. I think He will impress upon your heart. He does that for me. Like I don't know how to explain it. There's just a sense of, I need to talk to that person. Yeah. I get that sometimes when I go to the hospital to visit a church member, and sometimes I'll be walking down the hall after I visited the church member, and I'll see into a room, and there's a person laying in bed, and there's just a sense like I need to go talk to that person. And so I'll go in there and I'll just say, hey, I'm a pastor. Could I pray for you? And I've had really good conversations that way, and got to pray with a lot of believers that way, people who are already believers. But I think the Lord directing me to be His hands and His feet in that situation. And I'm thankful for that. And it grieves my heart when I don't obey the Spirit in those leadings.
Yeah.
So trust the Lord's leading. He will guide you. But pay attention. You have to pay attention to what's going on, and I think it's really important to start your day saying, Lord, I want to be used. Please direct me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also easy to talk yourself out of those.
Yeah.
Like in the moment.
Yeah.
It's easy to maybe you have that sense, like you're explaining, and then it's easy to say, well, I don't know this. I don't know. I just got so much to do.
Yeah.
I've really got to be at this meeting. I don't want to be late, and you can come up with a million excuses to not do something.
The more that you listen to the Spirit and obey His leading, I think the clearer His leadings become.
Mm-hmm.
The more that you ignore them, the harder it is to detect them.
Yeah. So what about sacrificing things? We were talking about that a little bit before. What does it look like to sacrifice, whether that's our time or money or whatever it is?
I think again, you trust the Spirit's leading, and I think that in those moments, what's the need of the person, and what can I do to alleviate that need? And sometimes that is going to require a sacrifice of something. It's going to require you to spend some time that you weren't anticipating. It's going to require you to spend some money that you weren't anticipating. It's going to require you to get involved. Sacrifices in many different ways: time, money, resources, talents, emotion. Just sometimes it's extremely emotionally exhausting to hear people's concern and try to help them navigate through those emotions biblically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be very taxing. And so then that's a sacrifice too. So I think you have to trust the Lord to not only show you the situation, but to show you what needs to be done to alleviate the situation. And there's a reason God is directing you to that, because he has resourced you in a particular way to meet that need.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you'll know what needs to be given. And the sacrifice part comes when you're like, oh, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to, if I say hi to that person and ask how they're doing, I'm going to be here for 30, 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be willing to do that. So.
Yeah. I was chuckling at that because I've had that conversation with myself in my head several times.
Yeah.
So the last thing that I want to discuss before we wrap this episode up, we've talked about the broadening of our reach into not necessarily programmatic ways of serving, but let's talk about programs just for a second.
Okay.
Andy did a phenomenal job of explaining all of the different ways that you can serve in your local church, in your community. But one thing that I want to balance that out with is I guess there's I don't know if temptation is the right word, but there's this inclination to overserve. And I know that sounds weird to say, like, oh, what do you mean overserve? But it is possible to sign up for all of the different programs possible, to be here anytime the doors are open. And as a result, you become burnt out on service.
I think that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that in many churches, you got about 20% of the congregation doing 80% of the work.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be very careful of that. A couple of things have to be done. I think you have to begin to teach the congregation about service, about following Jesus. It's not a consumer activity. It's not a spectator activity. You either follow him or you don't follow him, And so following Jesus means obeying him, and that means loving others as you love yourself. So that's serving. So, but I think sometimes we tend to limit serving to being on a committee at church, working in the nursery at church, being an usher at church, being on security team at church, doing something at the church. And those are legitimate services. But I think that's a very small slice of the service pie that you need to be doing on a daily basis. I think the one-to-one service that you do or that your family does for others in the community, in your circles of influence, is more significant and more important. And many times we, like you say, burn ourselves out because we're afraid this ministry is going to fall apart if we don't, like I've said before, like if we don't have enough volunteers, we're just not going to do this ministry because you clearly don't think that this is significant enough to do. And that's fine. That's legitimate. Like if the church family doesn't believe this is legit, that we need to devote time and energy and effort to it, that's fine. We won't do it. And I think that we have to be willing to say, we're not going to do that, whatever that may be, rather than just force people to keep going at these different ministries. And so I think the church needs to reevaluate. When I say church, I mean church at large. Individual churches need to reevaluate what we're asking our people to do.
Yeah.
Are these things benefiting the kingdom of God? Some of the stuff is management. Like, you have to have a finance team. You have to have personnel. You have to have some of these things. They're not glamorous. They're necessary, though. But I think you have to think about what we're doing and bring everything to the table, every so often, and say, is this really effective at pushing the kingdom agenda, so to speak? Is this really advancing the kingdom of God, or is this just advancing our kingdom? Or is this just
something we've always done?
And I think that's where you wear people out, is when you're doing stuff just because we've always done stuff, and that's not healthy or good. So more church family needs to share the responsibility, and sometimes you just have to say, well, until we have more people willing, we're just not going to do this. I was at a church many years ago. It's not this church, but a different church, and we could not get anyone to work in the nursery. And I got tired of asking people. And so I just said, okay, if you're a member of the church, I put you on the nursery rotation, and we're all going to serve, and then they realized, like, oh, I only serve once every 6 months. That's pretty cool. And suddenly their attitudes changed about it. But everyone was afraid to volunteer, and then they would be in there all the time because they knew how the system had worked. And so nobody was volunteering, and it was just a mess. So we just have to be careful why we do what we're doing. Doesn't matter. Don't overtax our people. Be willing to let things shut down.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's wrap this episode up. We are glad that you've joined us on this episode of Following. Thank you for listening. We hope that you found it helpful. We would encourage you to start small, start serving your family, start serving your friends. Pay attention to those around you. Keep your eyes and your ears open for the needs of others instead of the needs or wants of yourself, and go and follow Jesus in this way. Phil, any closing remarks?
Until next week, keep following Jesus.
Keep following Jesus. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. We hope you found it helpful and practical. Follow, subscribe, like, and share this podcast with others. If you would like to hear more on this biblical text, click the link in the description below. Check out hopeformacon.com for more resources to help you in following Jesus.